Night falls differently on certain stories. And in Singapore, a country built on order, precision, and predictability, few names have ever broken the silence the way one man did. Mas Selamat Kastari. A man whose reputation grew not from the crimes he carried out, but from the ones he was believed capable of. From the very beginning, authorities never treated him like an ordinary suspect. They watched him like someone studying a storm on the horizon, distant for now, but carrying the potential to tear through everything. But the question that kept surfacing was simple. How did someone so quiet, so unassuming, become the face of Singapore's greatest internal threat? To answer that, we need to go back to the start, long before the headlines, the posters, and the manhunt that would eventually shake the country. Who is Mas Selamat? Mas Selamat grew up as another face in the region's crowded urban landscape, but Singapore's internal security department believed he was more than that. According to their verified assessments, he aligned himself with Jemaah Islamiyah, the Southeast Asian militant network responsible for attacks in the region. Not only aligned, but became the alleged head of the Singapore cell. Authorities described him as highly motivated, deeply committed, and someone who had trained in Afghanistan, a detail that immediately elevated him from a local extremist to a regional-level threat. His background alone placed him under close watch, but what happened next sealed his place in the nation's memory. In December 2001, Singaporean authorities uncovered a plot, a plan targeting Changi Airport, involving truck bombs, a coordinated operation linked to Jemaah Islamiyah. The plot never materialized, it was disrupted. But to Singapore's investigators, the intention was more important than the execution. Mas Selamat fled the country immediately after the plot was exposed. And this was the moment the story changed, because a fugitive with alleged extremist training is dangerous enough. But a fugitive who knows he's being hunted becomes unpredictable. For nearly 2 years, intelligence agencies across the region kept their radars open. In February 2003, their patience paid off. Mas Selamat was arrested in Indonesia, not for terrorism, but for immigration offences. The Indonesian authorities detained him without trial, holding him quietly away from the world, while Singapore continued to gather intelligence. But intelligence operations in Southeast Asia rarely end where they begin. The region is interconnected. Borders are lines on a map, not walls. And by 2006, negotiations between Singapore and Indonesia resulted in his deportation back to Singapore. This time he didn't return as a fugitive. He returned as a classified national security detainee. Singapore detained him under the Internal Security Act, a tool used only when the authorities believe someone poses an ongoing threat that cannot be addressed through regular criminal courts. And the government was very clear about why. They believed Mas Selamat was still ideologically committed, still trained, and still capable. But what exactly made him so dangerous? It wasn't bombs. It wasn't weapons. It wasn't even a long list of executed attacks. It was something far more unsettling, the idea that he represented a network, not just an individual. Singapore prides itself on preventing threats before they reach the public. Their security architecture is proactive, not reactive. In their assessment, Mas Selamat was not just another extremist sympathizer. He was someone with regional militant ties, access to a trained network, ideological conviction, and the ability to coordinate operations. This made him a strategic threat, the kind that lives in intelligence memos, not police files. He became the face of the internal threat Singapore believed it had narrowly avoided in 2001, a figure who existed in the space between what happened and what could have happened. But his story was just getting started. Because the most shocking chapter, the one that turned him from a security concern into a national obsession, hadn't happened yet. And when it did, it wouldn't just test Singapore's security system, it would expose cracks no one believed existed. Before we continue, if you're finding this breakdown valuable and you want more detailed, fact-driven true crime documentaries like this, make sure you subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and it ensures you never miss the next part of this investigation. Inside the Whitley Road Detention Centre, Mas Selamat was kept under high security conditions. But high security does not mean infallible. And the longer he stayed inside, the more the system around him began to relax into routine. Singapore believed it had neutralized the threat. They believed the most dangerous chapters of his story were already behind them. But they were wrong. Because Mas Selamat was not done. He was waiting, watching, studying the patterns around him. Authorities had labeled him disciplined, patient, and deeply committed. All of those traits, the same ones that made him dangerous on the outside, were still present on the inside. Singapore is a city built on precision. Cameras on every corner, checkpoints at every border, patrols in every neighborhood. Every security protocol is rehearsed, audited, and double-checked. And yet, on the 27th of February 2008, that sense of control was shattered in less than an hour. How does a man under constant surveillance, classified as the nation's highest-risk detainee, simply vanish? At approximately 4 or 5 p.m., Mas Selamat Kastari did just that. The day had been like any other inside the Whitley Road Detention Centre. High walls, strict protocols, a network of security personnel ensuring that a man whose very ideology threatened national safety remained contained. And yet, despite layers of control, despite every assumption of invulnerability, the system failed. According to verified reports, Mas Selamat was excused for a family visit, a carefully monitored privilege granted to detainees under the Internal Security Act. He was allowed a brief trip outside his cell for a toilet break. But in that routine, a lapse occurred. The ventilation window he accessed had no grills. Security protocols that should have been infallible were incomplete. No alarm sounded, no officer witnessed him leave. And just like that, a man who should have been impossible to miss was gone. A nation suddenly faced a chilling question. How do you search for someone in a city that never sleeps? Someone who now blends with the streets, the crowds, the traffic. Investigators immediately ruled out external help. There was no evidence that anyone had assisted him. This wasn't a breakout orchestrated by a shadow network. This was a lone man, trained, patient, and methodical, exploiting the smallest gap to execute the impossible. Within minutes, the alarm spread. Singaporean authorities, the police, military, and civil defense went into full mobilization. Roadblocks were erected, coastal surveillance intensified, forested areas and less accessible locations were patrolled. Every possible exit route, every stretch of land and sea became a zone of suspicion. Despite the city's small size and technological superiority, the search failed to locate him. It was the largest manhunt in Singapore's history. And yet, the man the government described as highly trained, ideologically committed, and potentially dangerous was nowhere to be found. How does a country built on order cope when a single person becomes the symbol of everything they cannot control? For a city accustomed to safety, the psychological effect was seismic. News of the escape spread quickly. Headlines screamed about a missing detainee who had been classified under high security protocols for national safety reasons. Authorities urged calm, but the underlying message was clear. Singapore had lost its most dangerous detainee. For the first time in modern memory, the citizens confronted the reality that security could fail, not in abstract, but in very real, very public terms. And in those hours, the question wasn't just about the escape itself, it was about what Mas Selamat might do next. The country became a pressure cooker. Citizens reported suspicious activity. CCTV cameras across the island were combed for anything out of the ordinary. Patrols doubled, tripled, yet every trace seemed to vanish like smoke. The authorities had no confirmed sightings and no evidence of flight. Singapore, with its tiny geography and intensive surveillance, had become a hunting ground with no prey in sight. Officials described the operation as unprecedented. Police, army, and civil defense forces coordinated seamlessly, but even their best efforts could not overcome the simple fact that Mas Selamat had disappeared before anyone could react. And as days passed, the initial shock shifted into fear. Every unguarded corner, every overlooked protocol suddenly seemed like a potential vulnerability. If you want to stay on top of this investigation, with each verified fact broken down like never before, subscribe now. True crime at this depth isn't easy to find, and every next chapter of this story reveals more about the world we don't see, but should. Authorities did not stop. Search teams spread across Singapore, from the dense vegetation of forested zones to coastal areas along the Straits of Johor. Helicopters scanned the terrain. Thermal cameras were deployed. Every boat leaving the island was stopped and searched. Despite the intensity, Mas Selamat remained unseen. For over a week, the country held its collective breath. Singaporean intelligence was mobilized not just domestically, but across borders. Neighboring Malaysia and Indonesia were notified. Every checkpoint, every border crossing was on high alert. And yet, the manhunt revealed something more chilling than his disappearance. The realization that someone with this level of training and ideological commitment could exploit even the smallest lapse to evade detection entirely. If a country like Singapore, technologically advanced, tightly monitored and meticulously organized, could not catch him immediately, what did that say about the kind of threat Mas Selamat represented? The escape fundamentally changed how Southeast Asian authorities coordinated intelligence. It revealed weaknesses in detention security, and it highlighted the human factor. No system is perfect when a determined individual is watching, waiting, and willing to act. Mas Selamat was no longer just a detainee. He became a ghost, a symbol of uncertainty that even the best-trained security forces could not immediately contain. The man who had once orchestrated plots from the shadows was now literally untouchable, at least temporarily. For months, Mas Selamat's absence became both symbolic and strategic. He was no longer just a detainee, he was a shadow moving between borders, a constant reminder that even the tightest security can fail. Singaporean investigators worked tirelessly. They interrogated relatives, reviewed transit logs, and scrutinized CCTV footage. Yet every lead pointed to ambiguity, every clue evaporated into uncertainty. And behind the calm of daily life, a nation feared that its most dangerous man could be walking freely, unseen, unchallenged, and fully aware of the panic he had triggered. Officials did not rule out the possibility that Mas Selamat had crossed into Malaysia, a country with porous rural borders that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. The search was no longer just about Singapore. It was about regional coordination, intelligence sharing, and predicting the invisible. The Malaysian Special Branch began its own surveillance. Unlike Singapore's overt manhunt, roadblocks, coast guards, and military patrols, Malaysian intelligence operated in silence. They conducted covert observations, quietly monitoring key locations, relatives, homes, and known associates. Any ordinary movement could conceal extraordinary activity. Every taxi, every bus, every footstep might have been him. Imagine a man walking among millions, yet every nation knows his face, every border officer is alert, and still he remains unseen. Behind the scenes, Singaporean, Malaysian, and Indonesian intelligence collaborated continuously. Meetings were held in secure locations, data was shared cautiously, and yet for the public there was nothing to see, only silence. Only the creeping fear of the unknown. While the physical hunt yielded nothing, the psychological impact was immense. Media outlets speculated, citizens debated, and authorities maintained a carefully calibrated public stance. Officials reminded the public that Mas Selamat was extremely trained, extremely dangerous, and could not be underestimated. Every sighting report, every unconfirmed tip, became part of a pattern that had to be rigorously verified. Mistakes could be fatal. And in the minds of investigators, a haunting question persisted. Could a man with this training remain undetected for over a year in a region that was watching his every possible move? Intelligence agencies relied on patterns, behavior analysis, and covert surveillance. Every known associate, every contact point, and every possible safe house was scrutinized. The fugitive was not just a man. He was a calculated problem, a living puzzle whose movements had to be predicted with precision. Yet the more authorities searched, the more they realized. Mas Selamat was always one step ahead. His ability to avoid detection wasn't a flaw in Singapore's security. It was a testament to his discipline, preparation, and understanding of regional dynamics. And then came the question that kept investigators awake at night. If he could evade a nation's top security forces, how many others might he have been hiding from entirely? Weeks became months. Months became over a year. Public interest fluctuated between hope and dread. Mas Selamat had become a phantom figure, his story told in headlines, but never witnessed firsthand. In Singapore, authorities continued to review security protocols, learning from what had happened, but the manhunt remained active and alive behind closed doors. Borders were monitored, tips were evaluated. Every unverified report was an opportunity for him to be spotted. yet every lead remained inconclusive. If you want to follow this story to its full truth, with every verified fact and shadowy detail explored like never before, subscribe now. This is not sensationalism. This is the reconstruction of a manhunt that stretched across borders, time, and imagination itself. It was nearly 14 months later, on the 1st of April 2009, that the public finally learned the truth. Mas Selamat Kastari had been captured on the 20th of April 2008, almost a year prior, in Skudai, Johor, Malaysia. The delay in announcing the arrest was deliberate. Singaporean and Malaysian authorities had conducted a covert operation, ensuring his detention remained secret until the investigation was fully secured. For over a year, the fugitive had existed in a state of public invisibility. To citizens, he was still out there, walking among them, a ghost in the system. To investigators, he had already been in custody, quietly neutralized. But the story of his disappearance, the fear he inspired, and the lessons learned would shape regional security policy for years to come. The most remarkable fact wasn't that he had been captured. It was that for 14 months, the tension, the fear, and the uncertainty had been real. The nation had lived in suspense, believing a ghost walked among them. The Mas Selamat case became more than a story of escape. It became a case study in covert operations, cross-border intelligence, and the limits of surveillance. Singapore had faced the impossible, a highly trained extremist exploiting the smallest lapse to create maximum uncertainty. The manhunt revealed not just a fugitive, but the shadowy spaces between security measures, gaps that even in the most controlled city-state could be exploited. After 14 months of uncertainty, Mas Selamat Kastari's invisible journey finally met a concrete end. But it was far from the cinematic capture many imagined. No storming of a hideout, no dramatic confrontation, no fireworks lighting up the night sky. Instead, it was a precise, calculated operation, carried out in silence, in the shadows, by intelligence officers who had studied every aspect of his life and movements. What does it take to finally trap a man who had slipped through the fingers of a nation? The answer is patience, planning, and a meticulous understanding of human behavior. On the 20th of April 2008, the Malaysian Special Branch executed a covert operation in Skudai, Johor. Mas Selamat had been hiding in relative comfort, but not completely disconnected. Investigators knew his patterns, the people he trusted, and the locations he frequented. The operation was surgical. Authorities raided a property linked to his relatives and detained him without incident. The fugitive who had terrified Singapore and confounded its security apparatus was suddenly and quietly neutralized, not through brute force, but through intelligence and timing. It's important to understand the context here. Mas Selamat had become the symbol of a failure in security, yet his capture demonstrated the effectiveness of patient surveillance. Both Singaporean and Malaysian agencies had coordinated, but the public wouldn't hear about it until nearly a year later. To the people, he was still out there, a shadow roaming freely. Behind closed doors, however, the situation had already been resolved. Once detained, Mas Selamat was held under Malaysia's Internal Security Act. His detention was deliberately low profile. No press conferences, no public parades of triumph. Every aspect of the operation, from arrest to questioning, was shrouded in secrecy. Intelligence agencies operate like this. Visible results are rare, but the consequences of inaction are catastrophic. A man who had caused national panic remained unseen in public, yet under constant watch, a living embodiment of the adage, the quietest operations can be the deadliest effective ones. During his detention, authorities were primarily focused on two things: ensuring he could not escape again and extracting intelligence about his networks, contacts, and potential future threats. Mas Selamat had been deeply embedded in Jemaah Islamiyah, and any operational knowledge he held was invaluable for regional security. The story of Mas Selamat's arrest was intentionally withheld. Publicly, Singaporeans still feared that he might be wandering the streets, possibly planning something catastrophic. Behind the scenes, however, meticulous intelligence and diplomacy determined the safest and most strategic moment to announce his capture. On the 1st of April 2009, the Malaysian authorities revealed the truth. Mas Selamat had been arrested almost a year earlier. The delay was not incompetence. it was controlled information, ensuring that sensitive intelligence could be acted upon without compromise. For nearly a year, the nation lived in suspense, unaware that the fugitive they feared most had already been neutralized. How do you measure the tension of knowing the ghost is caught, yet publicly it still roams? This gap between operational success and public announcement is a hallmark of counterterrorism. It's a reminder that victories in intelligence are rarely cinematic. They're calculated, measured, and invisible to the general eye. After over 2 years in Malaysia, on the 24th of September 2010, Mas Selamat was deported back to Singapore. Once again, he was detained under the Internal Security Act due to continuing concerns about the threat he posed. Singaporean authorities had learned hard lessons from his escape. Even the most secure facility is vulnerable if procedures are overlooked, and even the most controlled environment can be exploited by a highly trained operative. The fugitive had returned not in triumph, not with violence, but under tight surveillance, reminding the world that the end of a manhunt is rarely as dramatic as the hunt itself. Once back on Singaporean soil, Mas Selamat was immediately placed in a secure facility. The goal was containment and prevention, not spectacle. Security agencies ensured that he would never again slip through the cracks, while intelligence teams continued to interrogate him, mining for insights into the JI network and future threats. The Mas Selamat case became a defining chapter in Southeast Asian counterterrorism. It revealed the fragility of security systems, the necessity of cross-border cooperation, and the complex psychology of high-value fugitives. Authorities learned that capturing a fugitive like Mas Selamat required more than manpower. It required precision, patience, and understanding the invisible networks that support such individuals. His escape and subsequent detention reshaped operational protocols, border controls, and intelligence sharing frameworks in the region. And yet, for the public, the most haunting fact remains. For months, a man capable of orchestrating extreme violence walked unseen among them, while the machinery of counterterrorism moved silently in the background. If you want to uncover the full truth about Mas Selamat's escape, the covert operations that followed, and the lessons learned from the largest manhunt Singapore had ever faced, subscribe now. Every detail, every verified fact, and every shadowy operation will be reconstructed in this series. Nothing sensationalized, everything factual. Unlike other high-profile manhunts, Mas Selamat's saga ended without public violence, without dramatic confrontation. There were no firefights, no explosions, no cinematic takedowns. Instead, the end was procedural, disciplined, and invisible. This ending is perhaps the most unsettling. A fugitive capable of terror did not die in a blaze of conflict. He was contained, and his story is a testament to the silent efficiency of intelligence work. The man who escaped a nation and caused unprecedented fear was finally a file, a dossier, a controlled variable. The files remain classified, the exact details of interrogation sealed. But the lesson is clear. True power is in patience, precision, and understanding your adversary better than they understand themselves. Mas Selamat Kastari's story is not just about escape. It is about the tension between fear and order, chaos and control, the visible and the invisible. For Singapore and the region, it became a study in human psychology, counterterrorism strategy, and the dangers of complacency. The nation learned that even the most secure system is only as strong as its weakest link, and that the shadow of one man can ripple across an entire country, leaving uncertainty, fear, and lessons that would shape policy for years. A fugitive who walked unseen for months, a nation on edge, and the quiet machinery of intelligence. This is how a manhunt ends, not in spectacle, but in silence.